Right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Franca-Bandera, and I'm with the Maricopa County Library District, and welcome to Know Your Rights Bike Law. Once again, the Maricopa County Library has teamed up with the Maricopa County Public Defender's Office, as well as several expert community partners. I'm going to introduce all of our experts here. Joining us from the Maricopa County Public Defender's Office is Mark Bivens, Kara Highland, and Casey Nickel. We also have 4 amazing community partners. The first partner actually speaks for 2 of our partners, the Rusty Spoke and Phoenix Spokespeople. We have Bill McComas. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself? We're missing your audio.
Sorry, I said I wouldn't do that. I'm with Rusty Spoke and Phoenix Spokespeople. The Rusty Spoke is a nonprofit bike shop in Phoenix, volunteer run. We're there to get people on bikes as cheaply as possible, in some cases for free. We offer many of our parts and bicycles in exchange for work trades. You come in our shop, volunteer to help us out, and you can earn credit towards bikes or parts. We also have a number of used bikes, from low-end department store bikes to high-end bikes for sale. We also provide a place to work on your bicycle. So if you need tools, work stands, or advice, quality may vary, we're there for that too. So you can work on your bike and we'll give you as much help as you need or don't need. The Phoenix Spokespeople, we're the advocacy group in Phoenix. We go to city council meetings, we go to budget hearings, we ask for money, we ask for the bicycle infrastructure be included in streets projects. The city does reach out to us and ask for our input on projects. They don't always take it, but they do ask. We're also around to do events. It's a social thing. You get people together that like to ride bikes, but also we give you the opportunity to learn how to ride your bike in a group, how to ride in traffic safely and follow the rules. We also do a number of events. We'll go to schools or host an event somewhere where people can learn how to safely use their bike as a form of transportation, not just something for recreation. So we'll talk about the gear you need to commute to work, how to lock your bike safely, how to ride in traffic safely, and that sort of thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Our next community partner is Bike Saviours, and for them we have Christian Doak.
Hi, I'm with Bike Saviours. We are a community-based bike collective in Tempe. Our focus is making bicycling as accessible to everyone as possible. We do this in a bunch of different ways. So like Rusty Spoke in Phoenix, we also do a work trade for parts and stand time. And we make it our business to make sure that we are providing cheap parts to people. We provide cheap bikes. And our main goal, though, is really education. We want to make sure that everyone has the ability to work on their bike and learns how to keep their bikes properly maintained. We feel like that's really key for people being able to get on bikes and use them as a safe and reliable mode of transportation. And so if you come to our shop and you need to do something to your bike, we'll teach you how to do it. I will note that right now, because of COVID, we aren't completely open to the public right now. We are currently just open for bike sales by appointment and part sales by appointment. But in the coming months, we do hope to fully reopen and restart all of our programs again. We look forward to seeing the public there at that point in time.
Perfect, thank you. And then our last community partner is the Tempe Bicycle Action Group. We have Stevie Milne and Jeff Casley.
Hey, I'm Jeff, and I volunteer with the Tempe Bicycle Action Group, a bicycle advocacy nonprofit based in Tempe. Our mission is to make bicycling a prominent, safe, and convenient form of transportation and recreation through education, grassroots event, and civic participation. So we have attended multiple city council meetings about various bicycle infrastructure in Tempe. As an individual bicyclist, I'm always emailing the city staff, streets guys or the bike guys about issues with the particular infrastructure, whether it be potholes or missing lane striping or what have you. So we're always looking for more people to get involved in the community. We can get you contacts with the city if you've got something Tempe has its 311 program. If you notice a street light is out, missing stop sign, something like that, you can just contact them through their webpage or an app, and they'll get that fixed pretty quickly.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much. And really thank you to all of our community partners. These webinars would not be as great as they are without the expert community partners. So we really appreciate them giving their time and their expertise to this. We also have links for a bunch of community resources for you. And this whole webinar, we're going to focus on really bike safety, bike maintenance, and the last part of the webinar is going to be about bike law. And so at the end of the presentation, I mean, you can ask questions. We're going to answer some questions. We can either answer them in the questions box or out loud in the webinar here. And, you know, we have our community partners and attorneys here who can answer questions. And just a reminder, though, while the attorneys, they cannot answer questions about specific cases or provide individual legal advice, we can answer questions about general topics that we're about to discuss. During the webinar, again, we may respond directly to your question by typing an answer in the question box, or we may talk about it at the end of the presentation. So if we don't get back to you right away, hang in there. We'll probably get to it by the end. If you have questions about other criminal defense topics, feel free to post them into the questions box because we are doing Know Your Rights events in the future. This is an ongoing program and we'd love to hear your ideas for future topics. So let's get started. Welcome to Know Your Rights, Bike Law. Jeff, are you ready to talk about bike safety?
Sure. So today we're talking about general bike safety as well as some rules of the road. On slide 1, even before getting on your bike to go for a ride, there are a few things you should consider doing to keep yourself safe and make your bike ride as enjoyable as possible. Wearing the proper footwear and head protection is important, and choosing light, breathable clothing that's more comfortable and can make you easier to see from a distance. It's amazing how much you can increase your visibility after dark by adding a reflective vest. Double check that your brakes work before you get to the end of your driveway. This way you'll know you can count on them when you get up to speed. If you expect to be out in the evening hours, be sure your bike is at least minimally equipped with a headlight and reflectors, as these are required by law. Slide 2. The ABC Quick Check is a great way to reacquaint yourself with your bike's current condition. This only takes a couple of minutes, but goes a long way to keeping you from having a problem later on during your ride. A is for air. Try to squeeze your tires. They should be firm and not flabby. If you own a bike, it's worth having a bike pump, the kind that stands upright with a T-handle. Even inexpensive ones usually have a pressure gauge on them. Inflate your tires to no more than the maximum pressure indicated on the sidewall. B is for brakes. Lift each end of the bike and spin that wheel to be sure the brakes are not rubbing. Hold the front brake tight and try to push the bike forward. If the brake does not hold the wheel from rotating, you'll need to address that before going for a ride. Do the same with the back wheel. Hold the brake tight and try to roll the bike backwards. Look that the brake shoes contact the rim squarely and do not touch the tire sidewall or overhang towards the spokes. C is for chain. Look at your chain to see that it's not dry or rusty. Check to make sure the chain is on the gears and does not have too much slack. Quick is short for quick release. Make sure the quick release levers are in the closed position, pointing up or backwards, and be sure that the wheels are secured to the bike and cannot be rocked side to side. Check is short for check it over. Twist the stem to make sure it's securely attached to the fork. Check to be sure your hand grips, shifters, and brake levers are secure and will not rotate or move around. Be sure your seat cannot rotate or slide down into the frame. Lift each end of the bike an inch or two and drop it as a bounce test, and to listen for rattling parts. Take a very short check ride, testing the brakes and shifting. If one bicycle component could be considered more important than any other, it might be the tires. Tires are your connection to and separation from the road. In some instances, having good tires can protect your inner tube from being punctured, like when encountering glass or rocks. Tires are also the only means of suspension on many bikes and can absorb small bumps. Keeping your tires inflated sufficiently can help prevent pinch flats. A pinch flat occurs when an inner tube is pinched between the roadway, usually a rock or curb, and the rim, the proverbial rock and hard place. Pinch flats can usually be identified after the fact by the pair of holes in close proximity to each other. That, and you usually get a bit of a jolt when an object you ride over compresses the tire all the way to the rim. Occasionally, you should check your tires for damage, maybe once a month or after passing over road debris. Lift each end of the bike and slowly spin the tire while looking for cuts, holes, bulges, or the casing showing through anywhere, as in these pictures. Since the rear wheel carries more weight than the front one, it usually wears out more quickly. It is also subject to more damage since some road debris is laying down until the front tire hits it and kicks it upright, like staples, screws, or nails. If one of your tires is worn out or too damaged to continue to use, replace it. Most riders recommend putting the new tire on the front and the older tire on the rear, as the new tire has better grip and will protect the inner tube from getting punctured and going flat. A flat back tire generally just slows you down, but a flat front tire can cause you to lose control and crash. Bicycle helmets are proven to reduce or prevent serious brain injury. It's best to purchase a helmet in person to be sure your head can fit inside it correctly. Once you have the proper size helmet for your head, you'll have to configure the strap so that it stays secure on your head in the event of a collision or fall. First, start with the helmet level on your head. If it's tipped too far back, you could strike your forehead if you fall. Adjust the side straps so the Y of the straps come together just under your ear. Then adjust the buckle so that it's tight enough to keep the helmet from moving around when you nod your head. Like a headbanger, but perhaps with a bit less enthusiasm. Be sure that your helmet has been certified for bicycle use by either the Consumer Product Safety Commission or the Snell Foundation. Usually that's indicated on the packaging or on stickers inside the helmet. Since helmets are important protective gear, you should replace them in the event of a fall or collision. Also, because of the materials helmets are made of, they should be stored inside. If you do this, a helmet can last up to 5 years. If you store it in a warm garage or shed, that cuts the helmet's life in half. Some important accessories to make your ride more enjoyable include being able to carry water with you. I'll assume that our viewers know that Phoenix gets hot. Having water and drinking some often can help keep your hydration levels up, allowing you to continue bicycling. It's ideal if you can access water while riding by using a bike-mounted bottle cages or even a hydration pack. This saves you the trouble of stopping and digging your water bottle out of a backpack or pannier. Securing your bike when you get to your destination helps make sure it's still there when you want to ride back home. So carry a lock with you and learn how to lock up your bike properly. Since some of the multi-use pathways are frequented by pedestrians, runners, and hikers, it's useful to have a bike bell. This is mounted on your handlebars within easy reach of your thumb, so you can use it to alert pedestrians or skaters or what have you ahead that you're approaching them. Sometimes you may have to ring it a few times, farther back, and then again closer, and even then there's a chance the pedestrian wearing earbuds. It's best to pass pedestrians with at least a 5-foot gap, since they can change direction quickly and may not have realized you were coming up on them. Trail etiquette always gives pedestrians right-of-way over bicyclists. So if you're riding on the sidewalk or pathway, provide sufficient space and give some warning of your approach. Though we don't see them much in Phoenix, horses, equestrians, also have right-of-way over bicycles. Should you encounter a horseback rider when out on the canals, it's best to stop, dismount, and get off the path and allow the rider to pass, as horses can be unpredictable. When it comes to locking your bike, the more the better is usually the answer. A decent U-lock with a short cable is usually sufficient for a quick run through the grocery store. If you're parking on a school campus or going to be away from the bike for an extended period, 2 U-locks would be better. Be sure to lock both wheels and the frame to whatever you have chosen to lock to. There are varying levels of bike racks. We prefer the ones that are tall enough to lean the bike frame against. This is a much better way to support a bike rather than one that only holds it up by one wheel. Remember that what you choose to lock to may be more easily defeated than the lock, and a thief may simply cut through a small tree or lift your bike over the pole you have chosen. securing your bike at home, you could lock it outside, but inside and out of sight is better. If you live in an apartment and have a bit of space, I would find a corner to put my bike in. Homeowners have a little more flexibility on space, but we have heard of thieves jumping over fences and cutting locks to steal them from fenced backyards. A privacy fence provides thieves plenty of time to cut locks without fear of being seen. You may remember hand signals from a driver's ed class, or maybe the state driver's test pamphlet if you ever read that. Bicyclists may be the primary user of hand signals since we do not have a directional signal lights like cars and motorcycles. Letting other road users know your intentions, making a left turn for instance, can relieve stress and confusion on drivers. It makes what might seem to be distracted wandering by a bicyclist into an obvious left turn and lets the driver know they can safely and legally pass on the right. When signaling for a right turn, a bicyclist can use either the traditional left arm pointing up from the elbow or the more obvious right arm outstretched to the right. A bicyclist is likely the only road user that can use this signal, as a motorcyclist's throttle is usually gripped by the right hand, and a car driver's right arm would still be within the vehicle and invisible. Slowing and stopping signal is less used in normal road situations since motorists should already be aware of the stop sign or red light the bicyclist is slowing for, but this signal comes in handy when riding in a group. It can signal to other users to slow for road conditions they may not have seen, like gravel or a large pool of water in the road. When riding in a group, it's also good to call out signals, right turn, etc., so riders behind you can prepare and turn more effectively. When riding on or adjacent to the roadway, always ride with the flow of traffic. This generally means riding on the right-hand side of the roadway, in a bike lane if one is provided. If there is no bike lane, ride a couple of feet to the left of the curb edge of the pavement. People driving vehicles are not expecting a bicycle to be approaching from the right, either on the street or on the sidewalk, as they will be looking to the left for an opening in traffic. Ride as predictably as possible. When passing parked cars, give yourself enough room so that a suddenly opened door cannot hit you. Taking the lane takes some practice and perhaps a bit of courage at first, but if a general purpose lane is too narrow to share, a bicyclist may ride several, 3 or 4 feet away from the curb or pavement edge as a signal to other road users to change lanes to pass. Sometimes while scanning the roadway ahead, you'll notice a road hazard, glass or gravel, branches or down barricades, and need to merge left. Perform this maneuver as safely as possible by looking over your shoulder to be sure the lane is clear, then signaling and finally moving to the left to avoid the area. One other somewhat common road hazard in the Phoenix area are railroad tracks. You should strive to cross the railroad tracks at 90-degree angles since narrow bike tires can easily fall in the gap and cause a crash. Railroad rails can also be very slippery, and riding straight across them can reduce the chance of falling. One other hazard I thought about last night is the steel construction plate or trench plate. Depending on the contractor and length of time the plate will be in place, it may be set even with the pavement or simply laid atop the street, giving an inch or two of bump up and down when crossing. Like with the railroad tracks, this steel can be very slippery when wet, so use caution and don't perform wild maneuvers when on top of one. The way I make a left turn will vary with the situation. Obviously, in your neighborhood, where the speed limit is 25 miles an hour with no lane striping and low traffic volume, I'd simply stick out my left hand and then make a turn as a car would. On many of the collector streets, particularly if they have a center two-way turn lane, I will still make the left turn like a normal vehicle. With higher traffic loads, it takes more awareness of the locations and speeds of nearby vehicles, but it's a fairly simple maneuver to look back for approaching vehicles, signaling and moving across to the center lane, like in the picture, and then waiting for oncoming traffic to clear before turning onto a crossing street. Out in the wilds of arterial streets, though, other factors come into play, extra traffic lanes and higher speeds. On my commute home each day, I will still make a left turn like any other vehicle, though sometimes it takes pausing a block back from my turn to wait for a clearing in traffic, before being able to merge from the bike lane to the center lane and wait for oncoming traffic to pass before making a turn. In other instances, I may make my left turn decisions based on the traffic signal phase. If the road I'm on has a green light and heavy traffic, I'll typically ride across on the right side of the road to the far corner and then turn and wait for a green light, like the second line in that diagram. Roundabouts. These are becoming more common in our city and vary from neighborhood intersection medians to multi-lane configurations. There's little to mention on those smaller ones since the traffic load and speed is generally so light as to allow cyclists and vehicles to intermix without any potential for conflict. The larger roundabouts are where some confusion can arise for American drivers. In every instance I have encountered, any bike lane present on the streets approaching a roundabout will end before entering it. This means that the bicyclist and the people driving vehicles will be sharing the lanes while negotiating the traffic circle. Just like when you're in a car, bicyclists approaching a roundabout must yield to traffic already in the circle. This means prepare to stop when approaching the yield line. Look to the left to see if there's an appropriate gap in traffic already occupying the circle, and then enter the circle into the chosen lane for your destination. If you're leaving the roundabout at the next opportunity, you should signal your intent to turn right, so any vehicles waiting to enter at that point know you are not proceeding past them. If you are proceeding to the next exit, the straight through, position yourself in the middle of the outside lane so the vehicle behind you cannot attempt to share your lane. Then once you pass the first exit, you can move to the right and signal you're turning right at the next exit. To make a left turn through a roundabout, it's recommended to occupy the inner circle in the illustration. Then, once you've passed the first exit, you can merge to the right as traffic permits, occupying the middle of the outside lane. Then signal your plan to turn right at the next exit. Roundabouts can be confusing, but as Americans have more experience with them, we'll learn to appreciate how well they can efficiently handle much higher vehicle loads than a four-way stop. Most roundabouts have an opportunity to negotiate them as a pedestrian using the sidewalk along the perimeter. As a bicyclist, you always have the option to dismount and proceed as a pedestrian. Always be aware of your surroundings when bicycling in traffic. Think of what drivers will be doing next, like when you're riding alongside a line of stopped cars. Is that car directly ahead of you going to turn in front of you without any warning? Are drivers hanging back from a driveway or cross street to allow a left-turning vehicle to enter? Can oncoming traffic see that you're a rightful road user riding in an area they cannot see because of that box truck ahead? Recognize that many bus stops are just beyond the intersection, so the bus beside or just in front of you may have to pull to the curb, maybe occupying the bike lane, to allow passengers to disembark. If a driver does something stupid or becomes angry or aggressive towards you, the best thing to do is to ride on. Yelling at them, while satisfying momentarily, is often what they are hoping for. Just like the bully on the playground, they will only pick on people that react in some way. If their actions are enough to make you feel physically threatened, get their license plate number and report them to the authorities. Group riding can be very enjoyable. If you're joining a new group ride, arrive early enough to hear the description of the ride and the protocol from the group leader. If there are multiple groups, and this is your first time, choose a group you know for sure you can keep up with for the distance planned. Some rides have a social-paced group as a catch-all for beginner riders. Verbally pass warning calls like road debris, glass, or pothole. Some cyclists will point them as they pass so the rider just behind them knows where they are on the roadway. And call out turns and stops. Maintain a straight line when riding and give short hand signals so the cyclists just behind you know what you are planning on doing should you need to change your line. Pay attention to the riders ahead of the one just in front of you. Don't get too focused on the rear tire immediately ahead of you. Work to stay ahead of the sweep rider. They're there to help any stragglers and know the route that is planned, so if you lose sight of the main group, they should be able to direct you to the destination. If you have to leave the group ride for any reason, it's a courtesy to let someone in the group know so they're not waiting for you at the next regroup point. 2 laws to be aware of, while they do not directly apply to bicyclists, are the 3-foot law, which specifies that all drivers of motor vehicles exercise due care by leaving safe distance of not less than 3 feet until the motor vehicle has safely passed the overtaken bicycle. Note, the law as written does not mention anything about lane striping. Unfortunately, some police officers and departments seem to think the law does not apply when a bicycle rider is in a bike lane. The other one is the hands-free law that prohibits a driver from physically holding a portable wireless communication device or other standalone electronic device except through the use of an earpiece, headphone, or device worn on the wrist. A driver may use their cell phone through the interface that's embedded in a motor vehicle that allows communication without the use of either of the driver's hands. In the end, bicycling is a great way to exercise and blow off some steam. I hope that you ride safely and get to your destination without incident. Of course, one of the side benefits is you get to see the city a little differently than walking or driving. Giving your muscles a bit of exercise while wandering through the neighborhood can give your mind a chance to relax. And thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. That was really great information. Can you help me run through like a real life scenario? So imagine this. Kara thinks that safety is super cool. She wants to make sure that she follows all of the bike rules, but she has a few questions. The first question, how can she ride safely with a group of friends?
So in Arizona, it is legal to ride 2 abreast, although in the neighborhoods, a group of folks will ride 3 and more if there's no traffic behind us. Part of riding with friends is the social aspect. It's so much fun. Wearing a helmet at all times. A friend of ours was just down at Tempe Town Lake, not even riding on the street, but managed to hit a patch of sand and ended up in the hospital with a minor concussion. So helmets are useful.
Definitely. How can she make sure that motorists know which way she's going to turn?
Hand signals are the only and best way to signal to other road users of your intents. While position on the road is helpful, hand signals certainly clarify that. If I'm in the right turn lane, I might be there to allow through traffic at 35 or 40 miles an hour to pass through that intersection, basically moving over to allow faster traffic to pass per state law. But I'm riding in the very left-hand edge of that right turn lane to keep somebody from coming up and performing a right hook on me.
And if she just needs to go like a little bit down the street, is it okay if she rides on the wrong side of traffic?
The law states no. I have to fess up to riding the wrong way on the sidewalk for half a block to get out of the grocery store and into the neighborhood. It seems to be, I've adjusted to this. I ride at 3 or 4 miles an hour. Probably ideally in that situation, I would be walking because a pedestrian would not be able to get a citation for riding the wrong way since they're walking.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for walking us through that hypothetical situation. And just a reminder to the audience here, your local Maricopa County Library has tons of additional resources. So we've got bike owners manuals, biking the Arizona trails, the road bike maintenance, idiot guides to bike repair and maintenance. So all these are free to rent from your local library as well. All right, so let's talk about bike maintenance. Christian and Bill made a really great video to teach you about bike maintenance. So let's play the video and then ask some questions.
Hi, welcome to Bike Saviours. My name is Christian Doak. I am a board member and volunteer mechanic here. And today I'm going to talk to you all about brakes. I want to talk about brakes because brakes are the most important piece of safety equipment on your bicycle. If you can't stop safely, you can't ride safely. And so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about this V-brake system right here. Now, some of what I'm going to talk about applies to multiple other braking systems. Some of it is V-brake specific, but I'm talking about V-brakes because time's a little bit short, and this is the most common style of bicycle brake. So chances are very good that this is what you have on your bike. So let's get started.
All right, these are the parts of a standard V-braking system. Over here we have some housing. Here we have a brake cable. Here we have 2 brake levers. And here we have 2 brake arms. And here we have what's called a noodle. Now, all of these parts are required for a functioning V-brake system. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about brake pads a little bit. To start off, I'm going to remove the brake pads from the brake arms that we already have here. To do this, you use an Allen key, and it just goes right into the nut that's on the end of there. And you torque it, and it'll come right off. And now you'll notice on here that there are the washers on here. Now, there is a convex washer and a concave washer on the inside of the brake arm, and another convex and concave washer on the outside. The reason for this is so that you can adjust the position of the brake pad relative to the brake arm and tilt it if you would like. Let me demonstrate that over here by just loosening this a little bit, because you'll notice it has a set position now. It's tilted a little bit forwards, and I can tilt that however I need to position it just right for the wheel. I'll show you how to do that on the bike in a moment. Okay, so now we're back at the bike looking at the V-brakes that are installed in this one. These are almost exactly the same as the ones we were just looking at, except these are black rather than silver. And again, you can see the brake pads that are on here. These are the newer brake pads that I was showing you. And you can also see that the cable is attached on here. The cable goes up through the noodle, which in turn goes through the brake housing, all the way up to the brake lever way up above. Now, one thing that I want to point out to everyone, a very common problem people encounter with wheels on bicycles when they're first really working with brakes is it's often difficult to remove a wheel from a bicycle while the brakes are still fully engaged. So if I try and remove this wheel right now, you'll notice I can't actually get it past the brake pads because the tire extends outwards from the rim. Now, the solution to this is to release the tension that's on the brake. And I do that by coming up here, squeezing the brake arms together, and then lifting the noodle out of the noodle's receiver. And then the brake arms open. And then I can squeeze out the wheel. This is also a good time to talk about how to remove one of the brake arms. Again, these are 5mm screws here. So just get in there and go to town on it. At this point in time, removing either of the brake arms isn't going to cause any problems because everything has already been tensioned up to the correct tension on here. So once the screw is removed, just pull it out and the brake arm will slide right off the brake boss. Now, you can see there's the pin, and then right there on the brake boss is the hole that's supposed to receive the pin. So to put this back in, I am going to release the spring on the brake arm so that it can rotate freely. Then I'm going to slide the brake arm back onto the brake boss, making sure that the pin goes through that hole right there. Then I'm going to reinsert the screw. And with this, you don't need to worry too much about over-tightening it. The brake boss, or the brake arm should still rotate freely because this isn't going to tighten down onto the brake arm. This is going to tighten down onto the brake boss underneath it. So this should not, if you're doing it correctly, prevent the brake arm from moving. And once that screw is in and tightened, we re-engage the spring and everything's back to normal. And then we can take the wheel and reinstall it. Sorry, I keep bumping my tripod. Which takes a little bit of coercing because this wheel is actually a tiny bit bigger than even the maximum size on the brake pads. And then at this point in time, you can squeeze the brake levers together again and take the noodle and insert it back into its receiver. And that should leave you with some working brakes again. Okay, now we're going to talk about positioning your brake pad appropriately. Ideally, you want your brake pad to get good full contact with the rim. And you want it to make that contact as nice and flat as possible. So, to do this, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to release the springs that are on both brake arms, so we have a little bit more room to maneuver here and we don't have to force ourselves as much. Then we're going to come in here and loosen the screw that is, well, loosen the nut that is holding the brake pad on. And at that point in time, once it's loose, it's basically going to float freely. And then we want to position the brake pad in the middle of the rim. At that point in time, holding the brake pad, slowly tighten the screw down. And with V-brakes, it's okay. We aren't worried about what's called toe-in, where the front of the brake pad strikes the wheel first. That's not as much of a concern. With other types of brake pads, that's much more of a concern, but because V-brake pads are so long, it's less of a concern. So now you can see we've got nice, good, solid contact right along the middle of the rim, so the brake pad is completely on the rim, and then we can put the two springs back on. And that's going to brake nicely. Okay, now that I've adjusted the brake pad so that it makes good contact with the rim, I have a different problem. The brake is actually rubbing on the other side of the wheel. Now, this isn't a problem with a misadjusted pad. This is actually a different problem. The brake arms are not evenly adjusted. There's a different amount of tension on the two springs. So you can see that as I try and rotate it, the arm on this side is rubbing against the wheel even though the brake isn't engaged. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get a standard Phillips head screwdriver, and then I'm going to come over to the tension adjustment spring on this side, and I am going to tighten the spring. Turn in a bit. Alright, didn't quite do the trick, so I'm going to tighten it a little bit more. Squeeze the brake a couple of times to make sure that I've got dialed it in properly. And there we go. There's no more rubbing. Now, normally what we'll do when it comes to adjusting a brake arm, you tighten the side that's rubbing. But if you can't tighten it any further, then you can loosen the side that's not rubbing, and it will still solve your problem. The last thing I want to discuss is how to adjust your brake cable. Now, ideally, you want your brake lever to stop before it hits your brake arm. Some distance. In this case, it's actually stopping about an inch away from the brake arm, which is good. You want that. The way we get that is by adjusting the brake cable. So to do that, first we release the springs on both brake arms. Which again can be a little bit of a bear. Then we loosen the nut that's on top of the brake arm. Then we take the noodle here and we set the noodle on the edge of the retaining cage. We don't want it going through like that, like it is when the brakes are actually fully set. We want it just set up against the edge like that. The reason for this is that setting it up against the edge like this means that there is going to be space when we tension down the cable. And it also means that we'll be able to remove the cable when we need to release all tension on the brakes so that you can remove the wheel easily. And next you push the two arms together, pull the brake cable tight, and then take out your 5mm again and tighten down the screw. that locks down the brake cable into place. Then you put both the springs back on, and then remove the noodle back into its retainer. And there you go.
So thank you for watching today. I hope the information that I gave you was useful to you, and we hope to see you in our shop whenever we resume our full operations, which we plan on doing as soon as COVID is no longer a risk to our customers or our volunteers. So with that, have a nice day and ride safe.
Thank you so much, Christian and Bill. Those are really fantastic videos. Just a quick note, I know sometimes the audio doesn't always come across well in webinars for videos. So if you had any trouble hearing those videos, we have posted the YouTube link in the chat box. So at the bottom of your webinar panel, you can look for the YouTube link, bookmark it, and then you can go through it step by step with your own bikes if you need to. So I hope we can just run through a quick another real life scenario. So Casey just got a new bike. She's super excited to learn how to take care of her bike. She notices that the chain is loose, the handlebars might crooked, and the seat kind of seems stuck. So what should she do to fix the chain?
Bill, you want to take that one?
Sure. It depends. On a single speed bike, what you need to do is put the chain on the back cog completely, and on the front, put it over the top half, and then just kind of pedal through it. Normally, I would hold the seat up and pedal through it, and then that chain should find its way over the whole front chain ring. If you got a multi-speed bike with a derailleur, you can push that derailleur forward, take the tension off the chain, and then kind of reposition it on the chain rings or the back. Then just give it a good spin to let it find back the gear it needs to be before you try to ride it again.
That makes sense. What about the handlebars?
So I'll handle that one. Basically with handlebars, so we have two main types of handlebars. We have what's called a full stem handlebar, a threaded all right. Where the handlebar is attached to the bike frame is called a headset. There are two different types of headsets. There are what are called threadless headsets, and they're threaded headsets. And that's where your handlebar is ultimately going to attach down to your bike. And there are two different ways of adjusting them. With a threadless headset, you'll see that there's a small little screw on top of your headset, and then two screws normally along the stem that connects your handlebars down. So what you do is you would loosen the two nuts that are on, or the two screws that are on the back of the stem. Don't touch the screw that's on the top of the stem because you don't want to adjust that. That's going to adjust the tension on your bearings. And once you loosen those two screws up that are on the back, you should be able to position your handlebars, rotate them however you need to, and then tighten those screws down, and then you're going to be good to go. The threadless, or with a threaded headset, it's even easier. So with those, there's only going to be a single screw on top of the stem. And there, you just loosen it up with an Allen key again, and then you can reposition your bars however you need them to be, and then tighten it down when they're where you want them.
Perfect. And then if the seat is stuck, is there a way to fix the seat?
Maybe. Stuck seats can be the biggest headache a bike shop will ever have. If you just want to readjust, it's usually one bolt, and usually either an Allen key or a smaller wrench. You loosen it, adjust the seat, slide it up and down, get it where you want, tighten it back down. Truly stuck seat posts there's countless videos of vices and torches and penetrating fluids and sawzalls and things to get truly stuck seat posts out. So if it's just an adjustment and it's a little sticky, usually a good twist of the seat's enough to get it loose. If it's truly stuck, what happens with seat posts is a steel post and an aluminum bike, just somewhat matter corrosions, and they almost weld themselves together. So it depends.
That makes sense. Well, worst case scenario, they can come into one of your shops and see how bad it really is.
Yeah, I'll say that if someone isn't able to move their seat post after loosening it up with a screw and maybe applying a little bit of oil around the seat post, they really should bring it to a bike shop, because we do see a lot of frames that come into our shop that are damaged because someone used a little bit too much force when they're trying to pull out a seat post. So if it doesn't come after you just loosen up the screw and put a little bit of oil on it, you should take it to somewhere that, that has a lot of experience handling this sort of thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you both. And just one last question. So what can our viewers do, like if they do need a new bike park, but they don't have the money to buy one? Do you guys have some sort of program?
Rusty spoke, that's one of the major things we do. Pretty much all of our used parts, except for the high-end stuff, has a dollar value and a time value. So for instance, used tires are $5 or half an hour. So if you just absolutely can't afford to buy the tire, help us out in the shop for half an hour. You might be sorting parts, you might be sweeping the floor, just whatever task we need done in the shop, and then you earn credit, and then that credit stays on the book. So if you work for an hour and only use half your credit, next time you come in, we have record of that credit, and that can be used on almost every used part we have, except for the high-end stuff.
Yeah, Bike Saviours has a very similar system. We also provide 10 hours of shop credit $10 of shop credit for every hour of volunteering that you do with us. And then that can also be used for used parts at our shop. It also is used for stand time. And in the past, we have had an earn a bike program as well, where individuals can use, if they bank up enough credit, and this is something that you need to set up in advance with our shop staff, then you can, at the end of your period of volunteering, you can earn one of our Build-A-Bikes. However, we are currently not running any of those programs right now because of COVID. We just don't, we feel like the risk is too high of someone getting infected in our space just because it's fairly enclosed. So when we reopen those programs, we'll be coming back though.
Fantastic. Those are really great programs.
If I might add real quick, we do have an earn a bike program as well. It's probably the best value at Rusty Spoke. Our department store quality bikes are available for work trade for only 5 hours. So 5 hours total, you earn the bike. It'll probably need some work. It may need a half hour of tuning, may need 2 hours of finding parts, but in addition to the 5 hours, anytime it takes to get it going. But we put a lot of people on bikes through that method.
I bet. That's fantastic. Thank you both so much. All right, so bike safety and maintenance are an ongoing responsibility. So remember that you can always rewatch this presentation. You'll get a recorded link after the presentation's over. And we're also going to be launching a new Know Your Rights podcast. The first episode we're hoping will be May 17th, and it'll be on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google, all the major podcast subscribing things. So whatever you use for podcasts, feel free to check us out. And there's also a ton of books and magazines for all ages at the library. So if you have kids or you're trying to teach bike safety to kids, we have a lot of kids books. They're picture books, some for older ages that talk about bikes. So now we're going to transition to our bike law section. So Kara, are you ready to talk about bike law?
I am. Thank you so much. All right, so we are going to be talking about a few different areas of bike law today. First, we're going to be talking about Arizona, and then more specifically, Tempe, Mesa, and Phoenix. So when I talk about Arizona laws, these are going to be found under the Arizona Revised Statutes. They apply to the whole state of Arizona. So any town that you are in Arizona, these laws will apply. And then we're going to talk more specifically, like I said, about laws for certain cities. First and foremost, two people that are responsible for young children. You cannot authorize children to violate any city codes. You are responsible for the fines that they may incur, even if they don't tell you about it. So you need to be talking to your children about bike safety and the rules of the road. All right, so I'm going to tell you guys about some different laws based on parts of the bike. So let's start at the very front of the bike. And this one is a big one, so I need you to pay attention here. You need to have a white headlight that is visible from a distance of at least 500 feet if you are cycling after sunset or before sunrise. As you know, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and a lot of my cases come in because my clients do not have the proper headlight. So this is very important if you are riding your bicycle at night. All right, next, you cannot attach your bicycle to a vehicle on the roadway. So I know that you guys have probably seen in movies, somebody with a rope holding on to the back of a car, riding their bicycle or their skateboard. Don't do that. Don't do it in Arizona, it's illegal. Next, every bicycle must have at least one brake that will do a wheel skid when you turn it on. So when you apply your brake. So what that means is you're you're braking, and your bike has to skid in order for that to be a street legal brake. Next, you must be able to have at least one hand on the handlebars at all times. That does not mean you have to have both hands on. That means you have to have the ability. So if you're carrying a very large package, you need to still be able to reach the handlebars with at least one hand. Next, every person riding the bicycle must have a regular seat to sit on. And finally, for the rear reflector, it needs to be visible from 50 feet to 300 feet, again, after sunset or before sunrise. This goes right along there with that headlight. So you need the headlight, you need that rear reflector. If you choose to have a lamp in the back of your bike, it needs to have a red light and it needs to be visible from 500 feet in addition to those reflectors. All right, so that bicycle and the headlight and those rear reflectors are really important for you. There are some other rules that I want you to be aware of. So for example, if you are riding on the road, you are responsible for adhering to the vehicle rules of the road. For example, I think Jeff talked about not using your cell phone when you ride. That's an Arizona driver law. You cannot do that while you bicycle either if you are bicycling on the road. You must ride with the flow of traffic when you are in the roadway. That's again another driver law. You can't drive up the road on the wrong side of the road. You need to stay as close as practicable to the right side of the street when you're riding on the street. So what that means, again, Jeff covered this in safety, is that you're staying on the right side of the street, but if there's something in your way, obviously you go around it. So if there's a parked car in the bicycle lane, just drive around it, stay to the right if you can, and then just get back to the right when you're able to. All right, those are the general laws that apply to all of Arizona for bicyclists. So now we're going to move on to some city-specific laws. I'm going to have Mark Bivens come on.
Thank you, Kara. So I will be talking specifically about 3 cities, Phoenix, Mesa, and Tempe. So the reason we chose those 3 cities specifically was because we determined that those cities have higher bicycle traffic. So if you live in Glendale, Peoria, Scottsdale, we do apologize, but we could potentially be adding more additions later on in the future. So for now, we will be focusing on these 3 cities. As Kara mentioned, she talked about the statewide statutes. Now, these cities had determined that those were great laws, but they wanted to focus more specifically on some additional laws. So next slide, please. So the first one, the big one, and one that I don't think very many people know about, is registering your bike. Now, this is required in Tempe and Mesa. It can be done in through the police department or done online. Now, you can also print out something through their website and you can mail it in. We recommend that if you are going to do it, you either do it online or you mail it in. Now, there is no fee. It's free. It's something that you don't have to pay for. And this is something that is also on the books in Phoenix. But when our team contacted that department, they said that it is no longer a license requirement and that registration is optional. But due to COVID, it is currently suspended. One thing that I think is very important to talk about is that when registering your bicycle, it does come with a frame serial number. So if you are buying a bicycle, a used bicycle, or you are given a used bicycle and the frame serial number has been removed, destroyed, scratched off in any way, it is best that you do go through the registration process and let them know that it has been destroyed, because this is a violation in the city of Tempe. So you want to make sure that you get a new number, because that could potentially be a violation and you could potentially be blamed for it. So if you do come into possession of one of those bicycles, make sure that you get it registered as soon as possible. Next slide, please. All right, so the rules of the road. I know Jeff talked about and focused on bike safety, but in reality, the reason bike safety is so important is because it also falls into the category of, it also is the law. You have to follow the rules of the road just as if you were in a vehicle. And the reason they want you to follow the rules of the road is because they want you to be safe. So while riding your bicycle, you still have to follow all the traffic control signals, the stop signs, and if they tell you to stop, you have to stop. And this includes all traffic, or excuse me, all construction signs. If they tell you to go a different route, you must go a different route. You cannot sneak through traffic or sneak through construction just simply because you're on a bicycle. You cannot ride against traffic. That's something that was also mentioned earlier in Jeff's presentation. That's for safety. If a vehicle cannot see you, you're putting yourself at risk and other vehicles at risk as well. So it's very important that you ride with traffic and not against traffic. If there is a bicycle lane, use a bicycle lane. That's very important. If there's no bicycle lane, you have to ride your bicycle as near to the right-hand side of the roadway as practicable. Now, there may be some confusion as what exactly that means. You just have to exercise due care. You have to drive as close to the right side of the road as possible. I think Jeff showed in one of his slides that if a vehicle is on the right side of the road, make sure you drive as far away from that vehicle to avoid a car door opening. So you want to just be safe. That's the main thing here, is to be safe when you're riding your bicycle. And if you're riding in a group, make sure that you only ride 2 people side by side. Now this applies mostly on the road. If you're driving or riding your bicycle on a bike path or a certain area that is set aside for exclusive use of bicycles, you can obviously ride in bigger groups. But when you're on the road, you can only ride with 2 people side by side. And again, this not only comes down to safety, but it comes down to whether or not you're following the rules of the road and following the laws. Next slide, please. All right, so something that was also brought up was riding on the sidewalk. It depends. Now, this is a very, very common answer when it comes to legal questions. Well, it depends. It depends on what city you're in. It depends on the situation, and it depends on where you're at as far as if there's a sign that allows you to do it. In Mesa, bicycles are allowed sometimes unless there's a sign that tells you specifically you're not allowed to ride on the sidewalk. If you're on the sidewalk, you must always give the right of way to pedestrians. In Tempe, if there is no bike lane or a sign prohibiting you from riding on the sidewalk, you can ride on the sidewalk. And the same thing, always give the right of way to pedestrians, always give the right of way to anyone in a assistive mobility device, which is essentially a wheelchair and those types of devices. I think Jeff talked about having a bell on your bicycle, which is very important, so you can let people know that you're going to pass them. Minors, if you're operating a bicycle, you can at all times ride on the sidewalk as long as you're accompanied by a parent or a guardian. In Phoenix, you must yield to pedestrians on the sidewalks, and you can ride on the sidewalk opposite of traffic. Let's see, this is very important, and I see it all the time. No electric bikes on the sidewalk. I know there's been a real big push recently with electric bikes, electric scooters. Those are all over Phoenix, all over Mesa, all over Tempe, and people are riding them on the sidewalks at all times. That is not allowed. In no jurisdiction are these electronic bikes or e-scooters allowed on these sidewalks. So if you do rent one of those, make sure you're not riding those on the sidewalk at any time. So parking, we put this in here because you just want to make sure you don't leave your bicycle obstructing pedestrian traffic, obstructing, any type of obviously vehicle traffic. You want to put it on the side of a building, that type of thing. But I think Jeff talked about making sure you lock your bicycle. That's the most important thing. Keep your bicycle safe, because police officers can confiscate your bicycle. If you just drop it on the sidewalk and go inside to get something to eat really quick, and an officer comes by and sees your bike just thrown on the ground, they can confiscate it. Next slide, please. Safety equipment. So always have a helmet. The law states actually is that no person under 18 shall operate or be a passenger without properly wearing a bicycle helmet. And Jeff talked about how to wear a helmet. However, I think everyone on this presentation will advise you, no matter what the law states, whether you're under 18, over 18, always wear a bicycle helmet and wear it properly. Now, the other thing is no siren or whistle. That does not mean no bell. Siren is loud, a whistle is loud, but you can always have a bell, because you do want to let people know that you are coming in their direction, that you are going to pass them. As Jeff mentioned, if you're on a bicycle trail, someone's running on that trail, they may have headphones on, they may not hear you, they might not be able to hear you if you're verbally saying something, so a bell is always important to let others know that you're around. Next slide, please. And again, just to reiterate, helmets are cool. And so not only is it the law to have a helmet for people under the age of 18, but it's very important because you can prevent 85% of brain injuries are prevented by wearing a helmet. And again, we put some Arizona cities and counties are requiring it for people under the age of 18. But again, it's our suggestion that no matter what age you are, please wear your bicycle helmet at all times. Next slide. And this is very Mesa specific. These laws are only for Mesa, and I believe one of them is also a statewide law that Kara mentioned, no dragging, no tying yourself to the back of a vehicle. And so the first one is no electrical bicycles, skateboards, electric scooters, any type of motorized skateboard, that type of thing are allowed on any type of government municipal building in the city. However, that does not include bicycles. Bicycles are still allowed on those properties, mostly because they do promote riding your bicycle to work in the city of Mesa, but no electronic vehicles or skateboards are allowed on any government municipal buildings within the city. That includes city parking structures, city parks, unless it's a public roadway within the city park. So basically the parking lot of a city park that's the only place it is allowed. Another thing that I found very interesting was that you cannot have any passengers on your bicycle when in operation, and that includes pegs. I remember when I was younger, we always had pegs. We had someone on the back and someone on the front. If I grew up in Mesa, I would be breaking the law. So luckily I did not grow up in Mesa, but you are not allowed to have any passengers on your bicycle when in motion. And as Kara mentioned, the state law, no clinging to the back of vehicles, whether it's by rope or whether you're holding on by your hand. And this last one, I think, is more specific to the electric bicycles, electric scooters, that type of thing. No exceeding the speed limit or any speed that is greater than reasonable. So I think that also applies, and it would apply to riding down a hill that would cause you to go in an excess speed that could be dangerous. So just be careful and think about what's around you and what could cause potential damage. Next slide, please. All right, so everything we talked about as far as laws, what could happen to you if you violated any of those laws? So far, everything we've talked about in the city of Tempe is a civil traffic violation. So the mandatory minimum of all of those is a $100 fine, and everything else is basically a financial fine. In Mesa, again, everything is a civil traffic violation with a maximum of $300. So if you violated anything we've talked about so far, you would not pay anything over $300. And the laws in Phoenix, again, civil traffic violation, unless it's a criminal act. And so that would be the next slide that we talk about. So if anything that violates the criminal statute, so anytime that you come in contact with a police officer and they ask you your name, you are required to give them your true name and date of birth. So if you are stopped by a police officer and they detain you lawfully based on reasonable suspicion, you are required to give them your full name and date of birth. So only thing that we suggest you say is, my name is Mark Bivens. I do not consent to a search. I do not want to answer your questions. I'd like to speak to a lawyer. For those individuals that are under the age of 18, ask for a parent or guardian. Oh, I see Kara shaking her head.
Yes, I would like to point out that if you are under 18, you still say these same exact words. My name is Kara Highland. I do not consent to a search. I do not want to answer your questions. I'd like to speak to a lawyer. Period. Stop talking. Here's the reason. Although you can legally ask for a parent or guardian, they are not lawyers, all right? I mean, they will hold your hand, but they are not lawyers and they're not going to help your situation, unfortunately. So you want to ask for a lawyer who can defend you in this situation. You ask for a lawyer and then you stop talking after you give your true name. You are not required in the state of Arizona to give your date of birth. Your name, you ask for a lawyer, you stop talking.
So specifically, I believe in the city of Tempe, you could be cited as for a misdemeanor for not providing full name and date of birth. And the next two would be to look out for is an assault, and that would come into play, like I talked about. Be careful when you're riding the bicycle, especially on a sidewalk or riding your bicycle very quickly. You want to be careful if you're intentionally scaring or recklessly harming another person. That could be a class 1 misdemeanor or even higher. And class 1 misdemeanors are punishable by 6 months in jail or more, depending on what kind of harm was caused. So that's something to be careful about as well. Reckless riding is another misdemeanor that you could be charged with. So if you ride with reckless disregard for the safety of a person or property, and so that's if you're, vehicles, parked vehicles, Those are things that you need to be careful about. That's a class 2 misdemeanor. That is punishable by 4 months in jail, and it's a maximum of $750 and 2 years of probation. So those are things to be careful and to watch out for while you're riding your bicycle. And next slide.
All right, so thank you, Mark and Kara. Like, that was a really great primer to kind of the laws about bikes. Now, it did bring up a lot of questions. So we're going to go through this hypothetical situation, and then we will circle back to some of these questions that came up, especially regarding the bike registration and e-bikes. Those are kind of sticky areas, so we will recircle back to those. But let's go through this quick scenario here. So Casey is riding her bike in the dark. She has a few glow sticks wrapped around the handlebars and a rear red reflector. A police officer comes by, stops Casey, tells her to get off her bike. The police officer asks for her name and demands to search her. Did the police officer have a reason to stop Casey?
Casey's glow sticks did not comply with the Arizona law for her headlight because it was after dark. So yes, the police officer did have a reason to stop Casey here.
Can she make her bike street legal right there?
If she has a light in her pocket, she does. She can. Otherwise, probably not. She'll need to walk it and take it to a store somewhere and get that light.
And does she have to provide her name to the police officer?
If they are in the process of arresting her, she does. If they ask for it, she does. Yeah.
And if they ask for ID, does she have to actually show her proof of ID?
She does not. In Arizona, you're not required to own an ID. So she is not required to show an ID. You don't need one to ride a bicycle here.
And does she have to allow the police officer to search her?
This is a tough question, and here is why. Police officers are allowed to search you when they're arresting you. They're allowed to search you for lawful reasons. However, I can see why some people might not think this is lawful because it's just a civil citation. But my recommendation is that if that is the case, you allow them to search you. You tell them, I do not consent to this, that you do not physically stop them. We don't want you to catch a resisting arrest charge here. We don't want you to get hurt. So although you can voice the words, I do not consent to this search. If they choose to search you anyway, if they say we're going to search you anyway, then you let your lawyer fight that out. All right. You do not physically fight with the police officers because that can put you in danger. That is the last thing that we want to recommend for you.
And if I could make one amendment to what I was talking about earlier, it's actually the city of Mesa. The statute requires that a person that is lawfully detained provide a truthful name and date of birth. And actually the statute does state that the person is required to give a full name and date of birth, but they are not compelled to answer any other inquiry from the police officer. So it's actually written in the statute that they don't have to answer any other questions, but they do have to give their full name and full date of birth.
Perfect. Thank you both. So just a quick note to Know Your Rights, our webinar here, we're expanding into a podcast. Casey, did you want to talk a little bit about our podcast?
Sure, Laura. So Know Your Rights has been expanding. We are working with a lot of different community groups. So if you have ideas about what you would want to hear or have us present on, please feel free to reach out to us. As Laura said, we're going to have our podcast coming out soon. Our first one is expected to come out May 16th, and you can follow us on Facebook, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, or Apple. You can also locate all our recorded webinars on the Maricopa County Library's website.
Thanks, Casey. And if anyone has any trouble, you can email any of us, and we are happy to point you in the right direction. So we had a lot of questions pop up during that webinar. We're going to keep continuing to take questions. So if you have questions, please type them into the questions box. So the first question really that came in, and really I think it's the first one that I know that we definitely had, was about bike registration. Is it actually enforced, and is it enforced evenly? What's the penalty if you don't register your bike?
Sure, thanks. So we talked about the state. In general, the state does not have a bike registration statute. So that's our starting point. Now to each individual city. Mesa and Tempe have voluntary bike registration, which means if you choose to register your bike with the police, you can. And if it gets stolen, then they will have on record that you owned that bicycle. Now, the city of Phoenix does have a bicycle license registration on the books. What that says is essentially that you need to go to the Department of Licenses and get your license and then take it to the police. However, in researching this, I attempted to do that, and I was told that they are no longer doing the bicycle license registration. So I was told that that law should have been taken off of the books, and there is no way at this time to get that bicycle license. But if you choose, like Tempe and Mesa, to register your bicycle, you can still go to the police department and ask that they record your bicycle serial number so that you have a record of owning it. So at this time, what we are being told is that the penalty in Phoenix is not being enforced. However, the law is still on the books at this time.
And I'll also add that if the serial number is scratched off, that's why I stated that it's very important to go through that process still, because if you are stopped on a bicycle, I believe that it would be concerning, because they may assume or think that you might have stolen that bicycle, even though you may have received it as a gift or bought it, secondhand. So I think it's important, if you do have a bicycle with a scratched off serial number, to still go through that process to make sure that they know that you did not steal that bicycle.
Thanks both. Another question came up about what happens if, from both sides, if a motor vehicle driver strikes a cyclist. If a cyclist is in a bike lane, what are the repercussions for the driver who hit the bike? But also for the cyclist, what should the cyclist do if you're hit by a motor vehicle?
Sure. So hitting somebody on a bicycle with a vehicle can lead to a lot of terrible things. That is a very dangerous thing to do. And unfortunately, it is the reality of being a cyclist in a major metropolitan area. That can be anything starting with murder, and it can go down to a hit and run. It can be assault. These are major felonies. So these are, again, very dangerous things to do because a car is so big and a bicycle is so small. There are a number of laws that will be broken if a vehicle does hit a bicyclist. If you're a bicyclist that has been hit by a vehicle, first, I'm going to urge you to get to a place of safety. So if you are in the road, do your best to get out of it. We don't need a second accident there. If you are able to, if you have your friends that are able to pull you and your bicycle out of the road, first and foremost is your safety. So with that, you also want to be calling the paramedics if you need to do that. And after that, you want to be calling the police, because that is, like I said, a major crime. That is very dangerous, and we are very concerned about drivers that hit bicyclists. This, as you know, is a bicycle-friendly area, and so we want to make sure that it is safe for everybody. It is not okay that vehicles are out there doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, basically, I mean, if you're a cyclist and you're hit by a car, it's almost the same way you treat it, just like if you were in a car accident in a car, right? You get the witness statements, you take pictures if you're able to, get, if the driver stops, you can get their information. So, it's a lot of it's the same. Hopefully you're not too injured to do all that. So thank you for answering those questions. And there was a little bit of questions about e-bikes. So do we know, are they treated the same as regular bicycles?
Yes and no. Like Mark said, it depends. That's sort of our line here. E-bikes are classified in a number of different ways. They're in statute 28-914, and this is the classification for all of Arizona. So in general, no, they're following some of the same laws, but like we said, they can't go on sidewalks. So that's a difference. E-bikes are classified by how fast they can go and what their start mechanism is, if it's pedal or if it's button. So there are some differences, and if you are riding an e-bike, you're going to want to look into those specifically. I know that there was also a question about whether cell phones, the cell phone law applied to just e-bikes. They apply to e-bikes and bicycles, because if you recall, bicycles are still tasked with following the rules of the road, and that is one of the rules of the road.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Laura,
Do you have something to add?
yeah, just jumping in on what Kara said, I think it's really important to remember that if you are riding an e-bike or a motorized bicycle, that DUI laws do apply to you. So anything that is not human powered can be charged as a DUI. So if that is an electric bicycle, a motorized bicycle, or even if you're riding a horse, those are all things that you can be charged for a DUI with if you are drinking while riding those. Interestingly, it does not apply to bicycles because those are human powered. So just keep that in mind. If you're riding an e-bike and bar hopping or doing something, don't be drinking and riding an e-bike. It's illegal.
Don't drink and drive in general. Is there a penalty for the 3-foot law? Do we know? Or does that just go into like if a cyclist is endangered and assault?
Most of the bike laws are civil violations. So any traffic violation you can be cited with. I mean, we have clients that get cited for all kinds of traffic violations, even riding a bike down an alley, which is another important thing to remember, is that under the transportation code, there's some alleys that you can't ride a bike down. So anything that would be involved with a bike, like Mark mentioned previously, would be a civil violation. And we went over some of the limits for those in different jurisdictions around us, but throughout Arizona, there's many jurisdictions. So I would suggest looking with your local city code and seeing if there's a specific citation for that and what the maximum or minimum fine could be.
And if anyone's unsure, because it's so specialized between the different cities and the different districts, you can always get in touch with a local lawyer who knows your particular city and the particular code as well. Are there any other questions? If you have any other questions, feel free to pop them into the questions chat. If not, remember that this webinar is recorded, so you will get a full recording of this afterwards. And it does look like that was our last question. Kara, over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in the Maricopa County Public Defender's Office Know Your Rights Bike Law. Please remember that all of our Know Your Rights are recorded and they can be accessed on the Maricopa County Library website. As public defenders, we know how important it is for you to know your rights. So if you have specific topics that you would like to discuss with us in the future, or you would like a future webinar to discuss, please comment in the question box now. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our community partners for joining us. Have a wonderful day.